Hi there, everybody. I'm Scarlett. I'm a cellist from Amsterdam. It's nice to see you here. And tonight we're going to listen to Rick Mooney, and he's going to talk about his book, Thumb Position, Book One. Hi there, Rick.
Hello, and it's so great to see you all again. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to let people know about the books and about some of the things that I do with my students, and give you a little guided tour and behind the scenes look at some of it. And once again, I want to say thanks to Scarlett for making this happen, because she's the one that does all the technical issue and gets it recorded and puts it up. And I probably would not do that myself. So she's been a really wonderful help in this entire project. Why don't we do just a little bit of business at first, and then so that way I will not forget. We have a session scheduled in 2 weeks on the 12th, no, that's wrong. On the 9th of November, 9 November, where we're going to talk about Thumb Position Book 2. This is something that Scarlett and I have talked about for quite a while, and I just, as thinking about it, I just decided I could not talk about all of that stuff all in one session. So that's why it has branched out to be almost 3 sessions in preparation for that book. Then Scarlett sent me an email saying that a few people were interested in talking about some bow strokes and some bowing techniques, because almost everything I've been talking about has been left hand. And we all know how important the bow is. The bow is really where the music is made. You know, you've got to find the notes, and that's a valuable and important thing that we do with my books. But when it really comes to creating art and making music, it's the bow. So that's going to happen on the 23rd November. And that'll be 2 weeks following the Thumb Position Book 2. All on Tuesdays, all at the same time. And at that point in time, I told Scarlett, at that point in time, you will all have heard everything I know, and we'll be done. So today, Thumb Position Book 1. First of all, let me tell you that my own personal experience, which caused me to do this, was, well, you know, I have admitted to this before. I got some rather poor training when I was young, and I had to fix it all later. And one of the things that might make me a good teacher is that by fixing all of those things later, I have very firm ideas about what happened and what to do and how to help my students to avoid some of the pitfalls that I experienced by myself. So here's the main story is that I wanted to play the Frankfurt E major sonata. And those of you who know that piece know that the middle movement is very fast, and it's all thumb position, and it's really hard. And I had a few of my colleagues perform that, and I heard a few of my colleagues be not too successful at that piece. And so I decided I was really going to work really hard, and I was not going to crash when I performed it. And I worked on it for a very long time. And I realized at a certain point in time in the midst of all of that work that for the first time ever, my hand felt comfortable up here. And it was mainly just the idea that I had had enough time to do it, to figure out the balance, to figure out the fingering patterns, to the extent that suddenly it worked. Suddenly my first finger didn't feel funny in thumb position. So I decided that what I needed to do was give my students some material and enough opportunity to repeat it until they gained that same level of comfort. So when I started this, I did not start out to write 2 thumb position books, but by the time I got enough enough of the repetition I wanted on the first 4 basic patterns. Well, it was a whole book in and of itself. And that's why it became 2 books, because what we have here in thumb position book 1 are the main basic 4 patterns. I'll come back in just a second about that. And what we have in thumb position book 2 is basically everything else. I want to repeat this business about lots of time of repetition for the students. There is a really nice little book out there, actually. I can't remember its real name, but it's a thumb position. I think Benoit and Sutton is the publisher, and they have some cute pieces in it, and it's all very nice, but it's only this thick. And it goes from our basic patterns to rather advanced thumb position things in a very short amount of time. And so I like that book, and the pieces in it are good, and you should know that that's a resource for you out there. But my whole idea was to do it and give the students enough repetition, enough opportunity to play things correctly, that they develop the habits that they need for the future. The pattern numbers, if I mentioned this in the past for a while, I think I am right about this, but these pattern numbers, I think, came from a guy in the United States, a well-known teacher named Luigi Silva. And so pattern number 1 with the half step, the semitone here, pattern number 2 with the semitone here, pattern number 3, and then pattern number 4, which is all whole steps, all whole tones. I believe those came from Silva. I didn't make those up. I did adapt them to position pieces book 2 when I was talking about this part of the cello, because nobody had given any of these guys numbers before in terms of fingering patterns. So I took this spacing and applied it here. So that's somewhat of a unique innovation, perhaps, that I provided. But these numbers are, I didn't make them up. They're out there. Janos Starker's got numbers in his book, but they're strange. They come in a weird order, and as far as I know, nobody uses them. So these are the ones that I grew up with, if you will, and therefore I am spreading that out. I would like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I'm going to try to say, and I'm going to try not to forget anything, and I may have to back and forth a little bit. Do have your students read the introduction. I've said this before about my other books. There is stuff in there, there's guidance in there about how they should approach thumb position. I will be telling you the things, but they're there, they're written there. I would like to make, as I did last time, when I made a little connection between my activities of book 10 posture and the 1-finger scale, I would like to make a connection between the 1-finger scale and this book. The one that I neglected to say last time. If we did this 1-finger scale, which we discussed, so I'm not going to go over it all again, there's a little exercise that I invented here that I call knuckle push-ups, which is I want the knuckles to collapse in between. And so we'll play it, and we'll have the knuckles spring and collapse and come back. And then we'll have the knuckles relax. There's a couple of things to be said about this. First, the students have got to learn this motion, okay? This where you can actually have the knuckles collapse and come back again. Now, I tell my students, look, I'm not at all suggesting we're ever going to actually play with our knuckles in that position, but we need to have that flexibility. Students will do this. They'll kind of move their arm and their thumb will come out and they'll think they're doing this thing, and it's not what I have in mind. I really am talking about keeping the arm and the thumb exactly where they are and just having the knuckles collapse, open, and be flexible. I have been saying for a number of years now that as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to being successful at the highest levels of playing and the highest nuances of tone and things, perhaps the most important thing we ever learn is how to be flexible, firm in the fingers and flexible in the knuckles at the same time. And I know that's a very large statement when you consider how many things we must know in order to be successful playing the cello. To claim that's the most important is perhaps a little bold, but I've thought about it a lot and I've talked to colleagues and I think it's true. Let's face it, you know, if you've got stiff knuckles, well, you can't form the fingering patterns. You'll play out of tune. If you got stiff knuckles, it doesn't move. You can't have vibrato, for instance. Same with the bow, which we will be talking about in a couple of weeks. If we have the firmness here and the flexibility here, at a high level, you really can't even make a smooth bow change without that flexibility. This is our shock absorbers, like in your car. So when you turn around in the direction, you can do so without hearing a bump. And lots of advanced techniques and things are requiring that kind of flexibility in the knuckles without allowing the fingers to flop around. So the combination of firm fingers and flexible knuckles turns out to be a very, very important thing to me. So remember that one of the things I've been talking about the last 2 sessions is to give students activities that they can do to feel the feeling of the issue that I'm trying to get across. And when they have the feeling and we have a label that we can communicate about that feeling, well, then we know, and I don't have to, you know, talk too much. It's just the activity. So this, just to finish this part of the conversation, 2 little push-ups here, 2 little push-ups here in the knuckles. Now you'll see that what happens if the students start to poke, well, this is not good. But if I make them collapse, at least at that moment, they're loosening up. And the ultimate plan is that they should be able to play all the time with their knuckles flexible and never let them poke. Okay, so add that, please, to the sequence of events that I gave you last time when we talked about the 1-finger scale. All right, so thumb position. First issue is the thumb has to go across 2 strings. Again, here at a very, very high level, I know people, there are certain pieces where you can't do that. There are certain pieces where you got to pull your thumb over and play only on 1 string because you've got to be playing open D along with it. So that's fine, but that's like an exception to me. There are even people who have recommended a possible putting the thumb under here for vibrato and whatnot. And, you know, fine, if that's something that people are exploring, well, good enough. But again, to me, that's an exception. What I need is my thumb to be across 2 strings. I don't want it across 3. The thumb must never come over to the G string. It must only touch the D and the A. And there are 2 reasons for this. One is that that's the way the fingering pattern is going to shape properly. You push it over too far, weird things start to happen with the hand position. The other is, let's face it, here's a knuckle, here's a joint, and this moment in our thumb is thicker than the rest of our thumb is. And if my joint is in the way and touching the fingerboard, these other fingers cannot stop the string firmly. So I want the strings to encounter the thumb out here, beyond that knuckle, beyond that joint. So right there is where the A string is, and right there, near the thumbnail, is where the D string is. One thing I'll say right now while I'm thinking about it, when I made this book and when I made the photographs in this book, I was so concerned about trying to let people understand this business of the soft knuckles that I fear I actually overdid it in the photographs, and my knuckles are actually too low in the photographs. If I were to ever do this book again, I'd redo the photographs. What I found when I was trying to get my students to do this with their knuckles is that the fingers all went suddenly too bent and touching the inside of the string with their fingernails encountering the fingerboard. And what we need to do is rather pull back a little bit from that, pull back a little bit. One of the things that I discovered as I explored that was that it felt a little off balance at first, you know, because I used to think, I do think still, but I used to make a big deal about this being like your hips when you walk. Your hips stay on top of your feet and help you keep your balance. And I think that's true, but if they're too far over, well, doesn't work. And when I started to pull back, I felt, frankly, a little bit off balance with some of the weight, some of the balance of my hand feeling off the edge of the fingerboard. One can get over that, though, okay? You can still make sure that the weight's coming from your back and sinking into the string. And then with this position of the knuckles, the fingers, you'll be touching on the finger ends. I have tried to stop, for the most part in my teaching, saying the words fingertips, because fingertips, I think, creates or tends to imply this. And so I'm thinking about the fleshy end of the finger and not the tip of it, okay? Thought just went right through my head, and it'll come back. Oh, here it is. This entire book, your thumb can stay on the D string and the A string in one spot, the entire book. I have lots of opportunities, we will see them as we go through, where I want the fingers to go over to the G string. And there are lots of reasons for this. One of the reasons is, as you might remember, we talked about in the past, the village and knowing the names of all the notes that live in that particular place on all of the strings. I like the idea of the fact that when I've got to play on the G string and I have to bring my elbow around to keep my third finger curved and balanced, it forces the students into a shape that is the one I want them to acquire. And so, however, having said all that, I'm in this book not asking for the thumb to move over to the G string. That's going to be in thumb position book 2. Okay, we got a specific chapter in that book about moving the thumb back and forth. In this, the students can rest their thumb on the D and the A and remain there for the whole book. Now, next, the entire book has the thumb on our favorite old harmonic spot here, our home base thumb position, where we're on the harmonic D and A. And at this point in time, you know, I like to use the harmonics in the past because it helped the students to get around without worrying about stopping the string firmly so they could hold a shape and softness. Well, at this point in time, I'm going to ask them to roll their hand back just a little bit and to sink into the string on the A string. Now, at the beginning of all this, I mean, somebody asked me last time about how do you acquire a thumb callus, because, you know, this hurts. Well, part of the deal is that we don't have to push it all the way down to the fingerboard right now. And if we can get our weight tilted and sinking and balanced, well, over time, we acquire what we need in order to be able to start playing off of this spot where we have to, in fact, have the thumb be completely firm against the fingerboard. Right now, all I want them to do is like press it halfway down, you know, tilt, sink, halfway down. Now, there's another reason why this is important to me. One of the reasons, this reason is that the harmonic can really, really fool us, because the harmonic exists over a relatively large part of the string. Now, it's clearest right in the center, right? But it's easy to have our thumb or our finger be off the spot and still sort of be getting the right sound in here. And I don't want this because my thumb needs to now be my baseline for measuring the rest of the fingering pattern and the rest of the distances and intervals. And if my thumb wiggles around here, it's going to mess all that up. So I want to put enough weight into the A string so that the thumb doesn't move around. I allow the D string to remain a harmonic. Again, basically through the entire book, I'm happy if the D is a harmonic. We are going to talk about moving the thumb off of that spot and what we got to do with our weight to put the thumb down firmly in other places, but this is the way we can get started. One of the things I was going to say, and I didn't say it, and I really should, is that today's session is not necessarily going to be a lot where I'm going to invite you to play a lot with me. I'm sorry about that. I hope that maybe got across to you. Because I see you all have your cellos, and that's fabulous. And I would like you to participate to whatever extent you're able to do. But this is less of a participatory session than it is letting me just tell you about what's going on. And then you can take it home and work on it. All right? One final thing before we actually get to the book itself. I do often introduce a thumb position shape sooner than we get to this book. This book, in terms of the Suzuki system of repertoire, this book has got to happen in book 5 somewhere. You know, halfway through, whatever, halfway through book 5. And that's because in book 6 comes the first pieces that truly require the use of the thumb as a finger in the pieces in the book. So this is all supposed to be preparation for that moment. So I have to be sure I'm doing this in book 5. But I can also get it done a little sooner. For instance, the first time we start talking about 3-octave scales, and my students have a really difficult time feeling comfortable up here because it's really such a foreign thing for them. Well, I'm happy to introduce French folk song to them. And that is, in fact, in this book. We're going to see it in just 1 minute. But the idea is by having them actually play that piece, by having them actually have that fingering pattern, well, suddenly, let's just say, a D major 3-octave scale is going to work for them, and it's not going to be all weird and uncomfortable. And so I often can get a little bit of thumb preparation going before we actually start this book. Okay, warm-ups. Every one of these patterns is preceded by a page or a page and a half of warm-ups. I tell my students that everything you need to know about these patterns is in the warm-ups. The pieces which follow are designed to be an enjoyable way to apply the knowledge and abilities that we acquire during the warm-ups. But if you ever, in the future, I say to my students, if you ever need to go back and brush up on the feeling of a fingering pattern, just hit the warm-ups, okay? Because it's all there. The warm-ups are designed, and I probably said this in one of my past sessions, but I'm not remembering well now, so let me just say it now. One of the reasons that I don't use a lot of etudes in my teaching is the etudes are very long and very complicated. They take a lot of time. They have a lot of points in those etudes, and it takes me away from the repertoire that I want to study to the students. What I truly like is the concept of daily exercise. And I remember talking about this now because the Fouillard book, Daily Exercise, is a perfect example. Only you open it up and it looks so awful that you don't want to even approach it. You shut it and put it aside. But the point about the Fouillard Daily Exercise and the Groot's Daily Exercise books, you do not do a page. You don't even do a line. You do a measure. You do a bar at a time. And you move from this one to this one to this one. And over time, the abilities compound and build, and you have what you need to know. So this is what I like about the warm-ups. They're short. They don't take a lot of your lesson time, your practice time to do. The warm-ups are designed to be easy to tell when you're doing them correctly, so that always when the students are doing it, we have the confidence that they're not going to accidentally be creating bad habits. They'll be doing it correctly with intonation. It's all built into the warm-ups. And finally, repetition. Every lesson when we get to this book, we are going to play warm-ups before we get to the pieces. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do the whole page and a half before you get to start the pieces. You know, just like in Position Pieces Book 2, somebody brought this up to me once, and I was so surprised. They felt like they needed to teach their students all the warm-ups before they started on the pieces. And now that was not my intention at all. Take a few warm-ups, get started, do a piece, and come back and forth and acquire the more complicated warm-ups and so on. So you don't have to feel like you must do all the warm-ups all at once, but you do a little bit. The very first warm-up in thumb position, in pattern 1, and let me say one more time, I always ask them to do the repeat because I need the repetition, okay? In terms of our work together and the time, I don't want to take time to do the repetitions necessarily in front of you, but I always ask my students to do that. The whole point of this, you see, is here's my D target place. This is our harmonic spot, and here's a D that has to match. Now, one of my colleagues actually said, you know, she found that pretty hard to set the third finger down without knowing about the intervening fingers yet. And so fine, okay? You don't have to start with number 1. You could start with number 4. It's all right. But just understand that that's my purpose, is to have us match against the thumb home base baseline spot. This, okay? And then we start filling in the in-betweeners. This one. This one actually comes, well, I don't know that I thought about it at the time, but Kodai, in his system of music for young children with singing and whatnot, he claims, and I think he's right, every child in the world knows this interval. Ya da 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 da. This is the stuff of all children's songs, right? And so here again, playing this third is a way that we can be fairly certain that the kids are going to get it. And then we're starting to measure the interval. Then I have 3 and 2 together, where we start talking about this relationship. And then in number 4 is Mary Had a Little Lamb, getting set with this interval, playing a song that all American kids anyway, they know it. They can play this in tune. And so on from there. I know in Europe there is another song that people sing maybe more frequently than Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's Hot Cross Buns. Same notes. Use it. If that's more familiar to your kids, use it, you know. But I'm going to repeat it again. The idea is to give them something that they know when it's right so that they practice correctly at home. Now, I'm going to go through basically all of the warm-ups in pattern 1 here, but I will probably not take time to go through all of the warm-ups in the entire book because they're all based in the same way. After I have sort of established The pattern at first, I always put in a scale exercise. So number 5 here. And I follow that up with a broken thirds exercise. And I follow that up with an arpeggio. All of the warm-ups have got those 3 lines basically in them. Followed finally by double stops. My kids don't like these. They don't like these. These are hard, okay? But like my double stops book, the entire purpose is to forces the hand into a proper orientation, a proper organization to play these notes in tune. And having a double stop, especially when we're playing against an open drone note, really helps them to understand when they're in tune and when they're not. So there's that double stop with a drone A, this double stop with a drone D. Followed by a line where the patterns change in other ways. I'm playing out of tune. I'll do better than that. Apologize to you all for that. One of the things you'll notice that I'm doing with this is once I get a finger down and in tune, then I leave that finger down to tune the next one to it. So like here, I've got D. And then D. And then B. And so on. So one can kind of lead to the next in a logical progression. All right, this might be a good chance for me to stop for a moment. Does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff at this point in time? We can have questions at the end too, but let me just ask you now. Okay, fine. Every section in this book, every pattern in this book begins with the same 3 pieces: French folk song, May song, and O Susanna. Now, again, O Susanna is an American folk song. Most of my kids know what it sounds like. I hope that it's clear enough so that even people from other countries can deal with it. French folk song being a scale-wise progression of notes, May song being an arpeggiated sequence of notes, and O Susanna just sort of applying however whatever is required. So I already played this for you. With the scale passages of that song. May song. And these 2 pieces are both in Suzuki Book 1, so my kids have it in their ears already. And one more time, I keep saying these things, it means they're going to play it correctly when they get home, because they know them. And then O Susanna is like, again, it adds just a little bit more complexity to it all. And, I can play it all for you, but you probably don't need to hear me do it, right? You get the idea. Now, what follows after that is a whole sequence of pieces that uses the same fingering pattern. And I'm not going to try and play through all of these pieces for you. It's at a certain point in time, the purpose and the issues become pretty obvious. Okay, I don't think there's too much in here that's enigmatic. Right? I'm just trying to show you how I've put it together. I'm trying to show you how I introduce it to my students. But Are You Sleeping? Frédéric Jacques from France, and some others. Let me ask you, if you've got your book there, to turn to page 10 and 11, because they illustrate something else that's important to me in this book. And this is going to, again, I'm going to say a lot of stuff about pattern 1. And then the rest of the patterns is just going to be basically the same. We won't have to talk nearly so much about the other patterns because it's the same issues, just with a different fingering pattern. I have tried in this book to kind of alternate between a slow singing song-like piece and a quick fiddle tune type of piece. And the reasons are this. Number one, with the fiddle tune piece, the point is to get your fingers set and held in place so that you can play quickly and accurately, because you're not going note by note by note, but you're going in a group and a shape and a pattern. So Soldier's Joy. The idea, again, you can see if I've got my hand there, all those notes are there waiting to be played. And you know, it's not like it's automatic. The kids are still finding their comfort level in this place, right? And I should probably say this again too. I almost forgot. I did mention this last session. I know that some people in this group are not necessarily teachers, but they are students themselves. And I do tend to talk about these things as if I was talking to teachers. So for that, you know, I apologize. I hope it makes sense to you. The point being, though, that you can take the same information and work on it on your own. And even if some of this stuff that I'm telling you right now is a little challenging for you at this moment, you now have a sequence and a progression that you can follow on your own over time, and it'll be out there on the video so that you can keep going back and referring to it, okay? But I do tend to talk as if I was talking to teachers. As long as you understand that, we're okay. I'll always remember you. I've composed a few songs in here just because I needed to fulfill a purpose and I couldn't find another piece, and so I composed one. I'll always remember you is an example of a slower, now more singing song-like piece. And one of the things that I really, really, really want now is vibrato. Because if the students are soft and balanced in their hand, the vibrato works. If they're poking or squeezing, the vibrato, not to mention the intonation, will not work. So the whole thing, and let me mention this moment. One of my colleagues does this all the time, and I've sort of borrowed it from Carrie Cheney. She makes all of her students vibrato on their thumb. And I do too now. I do too. Now, I tell my students, look, we got to understand that vibratoing on the thumb doesn't always produce the exact kind of sound we want for real, in real pieces in the future. And if we got a piece that's slow and we really want vibrato, well, we're going to shift and use a different finger. But being firm on the knuckle, on the joint as you push down the string, and really, really loose back in this one. Okay, I hope you can see that on the video. I want this joint back here, this one, to wiggle, okay? And if we can do that wiggle right here, the thumb actually can sound pretty good with vibrato, but the point is not so much to hear the correct vibrato sound as it is to make sure that we're firm in the fingers and flexible in the knuckles at the same time, right? It's just another one of those examples. So that's how this piece is supposed to go. Something funny with my bowing. I don't know what it was, but and you can hear it's a nice little song, you know, and we get this experience of being firm, making tone, playing in tune, but being loose so our fingers will wiggle and our knuckles will be soft and the vibrato works. Now, frankly, at this point in time, we pretty much talk about everything that I need to talk about. And the rest is all about repetition. As I mentioned, first thing, my goal here was to give my students simply enough opportunity to do it many times correctly, that by the end of this book, our foundation in thumb position with these patterns is secure. And from there, moving into the more complicated issues that will appear in thumb position book 2, we're fine. You know, the basic setup is there. So Arkansas Traveler. It's another American folk song, and it's a fiddle tune kind of piece. I wrote a little variation in it. Okay, and so that's American Traveler. 100 Pipers is nice. I've used a lot of like Irish fiddle tunes. And part of the deal here is, first of all, some of them are very cool. I went through a period in my life when I bought every Irish fiddle tune group CD that I could find, and the Chieftains and Altan and, you know, all these people that have done such a great job with that style of music. Think about a fiddle, they play it all in one position, right? I mean, it's not, I don't want to put it down because it's a particularly special and wonderful kind of ethnic sound and thing they do, but it doesn't approach classical music in terms of complexity of moving around the instrument. But because the violinists end up playing it all in first position, well, that means we can play all these things right here in this thumb position and not have to move around, you know? And so, and so on. And it's fun to play. It all lives in one spot on the fingerboard. Okay, then we get now to pattern 2. And here again is where I'm going to hurry up a bit. I don't think I need to repeat everything I have said, because everything I've said simply applies now to this pattern where our half step, our semitone, is here. And so we're going to begin here in this particular case with a Mary Had a Little Lamb to make sure we've got it in tune. And the warm-ups proceed in much the same way that I already showed you. You were adding fingers into the pattern bit by bit. Number 4 is the scale pattern 1. It starts on a C, which establishes this pattern for us. Number 5 is the broken chords 1. Number 6 is the arpeggio 1. 7, 8, 9 is the double stops once, for all the reasons I already said, so I won't repeat myself. Followed by French folk song, Maison, and O Susanna. Then we get some new ones, you know, the Bluebells of Scotland, the old folks at home, folk songs, where even if everybody does not know American folk songs, I mean, I may have said this because I talked about this in the Double Stops book. One of my friends at one point said, you know, there's some just wonderful French-Canadian folk songs, and you should probably try and use them. And I have no absolute doubt there are some beautiful French-Canadian folk songs, but I don't happen to know them. And therefore, they didn't appear in my books, all right? But even if people don't know the American folk songs like we do, the point of using a folk song is that the harmonies and stuff are supposed to be transparent enough that the students can still tell when they're playing it in tune. It's not supposed to be really hard. It's not supposed to be enigmatic at all. It's supposed to make sense to your ear. And that's why I've relied so heavily on folk songs. Crawdad, Devil's Dream being a big deal fiddle tune here. And so on, very much as I explained with the ones before. California Traveler is another fiddle tune that I just happened to make up. I just figured I just decided I wanted one more, so I wrote my own. And it's got, like at measure 10, you can see the same sort of issue. Where the idea is to hold the hand in shape, in place, and be able to move in tune because you're not moving around, you're thinking about a group, and to be able to move quickly because you're flexible. Keep in mind that if the knuckles are tight, you can't move fast. So if we're loose, we can move quickly. And that's why I like some of the fiddle tune ones. So here again, I'm gonna hurry up. I feel like I'm near the end of the things that I really want to say to you. Thumb position pattern 3, again, oh, I gotta say this though. I gotta say this. When I wrote this book, I was thinking that pattern 4 was going to be the hardest pattern for my kids. It turns out not true. Pattern 3 is the hardest. Pattern 3 is the hardest. And it's because of this weird half step here, this weird semitone here. And so there's, and the way one must do this is really curl the finger over, really let the fingernail actually encounter this fingerboard and play on the inside of the string here. It's the only way to get that in tune. If you try and go like this, well, you might get that one in tune, but look how it has messed up everything else. Okay, so you've got to do this, and then your whole finger pattern will work for you. One of the things that's kind of nice to know whether I actually make a big deal out of it or not is you know, variable. If I've got my weight already firm on my thumb, then in order to change its pitch, really quite literally, all I got to do is touch the inside of the string. It doesn't have to push down hard because the thumb's already got it down to the fingerboard, right? And all you got to do is kind of touch it on the inside. And it works. And I tell my students, you know, here again, in the future, if we've got a piece that needs a lot of vibrato and a beautiful singing tone, we're going to shift. We're going to avoid this pattern when we can. The fact remains that we got to be able to do it. What is the Haydn? Is it an A here? Well, here it is. There's pattern 3. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a double stop. You got to play it. And so we got to learn pattern 3. As weird as it is, as uncomfortable as it may seem at first, and as much as we will try to avoid it whenever we can in the future, there are simply times when you got to be able to do it. So it's a very important section of the book. I was about to jam right through it, but I needed to say all that to you guys because it's important to get good at this, get comfortable with it. But the way the warm-ups are constructed are the same. We start adding notes. We have a scale. We have a broken thirds. We have an arpeggio, and we have double stops. French folk song, Oh Susanna, May song, and then others. Songs, some of them singing that I want vibrato on, some of them quick that I want velocity on. And then again, finally, pattern 4. Pattern 4 being all whole tones. Now, this one is its own challenge. I did discover, however, it's not nearly as hard as pattern 3 is. But playing over here on the G string with this C sharp over here, it turns out to be kind of a big deal because I've really got to get my students to bring their elbow around so that their third finger reaches far enough and arrives curved so that it can be flexible with vibrato and all this other stuff we've been talking about. So after the warm-ups come French folk song, May song, Oh Susanna, and a whole series of other pieces. Here again, you see some of my bizarre sense of humor on page 46 when I decided to write a fiddle tune in this fingering pattern, and I had to call it Eat My Dust. You know, my students are so funny, they get used to me. And one of them said, you know, before I even saw your name there, I knew you wrote this piece because they've gotten used to my strange sense of humor. But it's so it's just a fiddle tune. It's just that I decided I needed to have another one, and so I just wrote it. Beginning with Minuet on page 47 is the final part of the book, which is the summarizing section. And you're used to this by now. If you have gone through Position Pieces Book 1, you're used to the fact that I introduce a pattern. And then at the end of each group, at the end of each section, I present pieces that have more than one pattern in it. So first thing we do is get used to the pattern. Second thing we do is be able to read it and recognize it, know the distances, and form the proper patterns and play the proper notes, even when the patterns start to change around. I started with Minuet and Rigadoon, again, on purpose, because those are in our Suzuki Book 1. And my kids know these pieces, and therefore they'll be able to play them in tune and know when it's right. Then I branch out in these very, very nice Tchaikovsky pieces that he wrote on the piano, the album for the young. And so on, and the German dance. Something like that, okay? Highland Hoedown is another collection of Irish folk tunes. Irish Washerwoman is famous. Walking music from Applebow. It happens that there's a book that I know that I have that has this. The guy's Swedish. And so I learned a Swedish folk song. And it's really a cute song. So I put it in here. Bach chorales I chose to use a lot in this. You will find them in thumb position book 2 as well. In the book, you know that everyone still studies in music theory class these days, 375 harmonized chorales or whatever the number is. And at the end of that book are the 2-part harmonizations. Most of the book is 4-part harmonizations of the chorales, which is why they study them up in theory class. You learn about all of the amazing things Bach did with the chord progressions that had never been done in music history before. But at the end are the 2-liners where you got the tune and 1 accompaniment line. So I borrowed a bunch of those to use them. And they're very beautiful, and you can use vibrato and all the things I've been saying. And you get some variety, you know? And you know what, guys? I'm done. That's it. That's the book. And let me just say one final time that the importance to me here is the amount of repetition and the ease and comfort that I want the students to acquire by the time they're done with this book. And then as they approach the more advanced techniques, as we start extending our fingers, our hand this way, as we start moving our thumb back and forth across strings, as we start getting into chromatic patterns, as we start moving our thumb off the harmonic home bass spot, well, the fundamental is already established. And all those other things are approachable. And that's the nature, that's the subject of our next talk. When I see you in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about all that other stuff in Thumb Position Book 2. So thank you again for giving me the opportunity to explain all of this to you. And we have a few minutes. If there's anybody has a question, just let me know.
I have a question. I have many students who have problems with this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you have special exercises or something?
My biggest, the best thing I can say about that is I feel like that kind of thing comes from being tight. And if I can keep my thumb kind of naturally straight across here and use my weight to sink in rather than pressing with my knuckles, it can help that. Don't forget, by the way, this is a little bit of what I'm going to show you now. I told you about last session. It's a little bit outside the realm of this book, but this thumb scale that we did, where we move up from note to note, the key of D is what I choose to use here, with wiggling in the knuckles to be sure that I'm not tight and pressing. This is one way to help the students acquire that feeling. I tell my students so much. I tell them this. You know, if stuff like this is going wrong, it is so common that that's being caused by tightness. That's the very first thing I want you to check when you're trying to solve it, is be sure you're loose and balanced and not tight. Now, if there's another issue, and if it has to do with the elbows and it has to do with the pronation of the hand, don't forget about how we pronated our hand so that the weight sank down into the thumb in a more natural way. If the hand doesn't pronate this way and the weight does not balance into the thumb, that's when they start pressing. So if those other things need to be addressed, well, then we must address them. But most often, in my experience, is when we have strangeness, this is another one kids will do, is they'll bend their thumb this way. And I believe that mainly from being tight. So I'm after the wiggles.
Yeah. And do you think it's allowed to when they play a slow piece with vibrato, they do like this?
That's a very good question too. And yes, it's okay with me. I try not to let them do it too much, especially in the fast ones, where it needs to kind of be there. But look, we've all seen Yo-Yo Ma play, and his finger goes like this, and he gets this fabulous sound, right? But it's not the way I want to teach my students the basic structure of their hand. But yeah, that happens. You get down on the, it's another discussion to have, and I'll say it, I thought of it once already today. I think it's commonly known among players and teachers that there are basically two sorts of orientations of our left hand on the fingerboard. One is kind of stood up on its tips for quickness, and the other is where you pull back and you play on the fleshy part of the finger for the big fat vibrato sound. And there are actually two different approaches and two different sets of balance for when it comes for the context of what you're trying to do with your music. So yes, I will. If we're really working on that sound, I'll let them collapse a little bit there, as long as it doesn't become a permanent habit. Yeah. Okay, there's one.
No.
Yes, is this, I can't read it. Is this Diana? Donna, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand go up.
Okay.
No?
Gisela. Hi.
I forgot to turn my mic on. Okay. Are there accompaniments recorded for the books? Hello?
Sorry, Rick.
I got muted somehow by magic because I didn't even approach the keyboard, but here I am. I'm back. People have mentioned it to me, and I've just never done it. People, I mean, there are two issues to be said here. One is with the position pieces, book one. People have asked me if I've recorded those pieces. And I actually had one adult student get really angry at me once when I said, no, I don't want to record those. It's not supposed to be something you play by ear. It's something that you read and figure out and do by knowledge. And she kind of went like this at me.
No, I meant the accompaniment, so we have something to play with.
I'd be extremely happy to do it. I'm just, at this point in my life, I'm probably not going to get to it. There are people on YouTube who have recorded accompaniment parts to these books.
Oh, okay.
That you can go look for. If you just go into YouTube and in their little search thing, just type my name in there. You will find a whole bunch of people with a lot of, some people playing them, some people playing the accompaniments, some people talking about their experience with them. And then of course you'll find these sessions as well when you go there. So check that out first. I do agree that it would be kind of nice for the students to hear the accompaniments when they're at home. I just have never done it. Okay, are we good here? Thanks.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I couldn't hear, sorry.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question. Do you have any recommendation to set up the hand when the student have a double joint? Because how we can keep their hand round and don't put the first finger really straight, or well, the double joint.
Okay. This is one that I don't have enough personal physical therapy kind of knowledge to help a lot with that real double joint, okay? I will tell you that in my experience, some people who claim they have double joints don't. They're just tight. They squeeze and it collapses, okay? And so basically we need, once again, to get the angle and the balance and not squeeze, and then the knuckles don't collapse. Now, there is such a thing as double joints. And let's see if I can get this so you can actually see it. There you go. There are actual little rings. I have a friend who truly has double joints. And she has a ring that goes across the joint on both sides of it and helps support it. We have one, here we go. Okay. Yeah, here we go. And if a person, because double joints are real. I mean, the tendon's too long is what a double joint is. And the tendon's too long and doesn't support the finger and it collapses. So having said what I said, which I firmly believe that most people who say they have double joints don't, well, we have to understand that, yes, it does exist. And occasionally we need to address it in ways like this. So I'm glad we had a person be able to show that to you.
They are getting stronger.
Pardon me?
I have them on both pinkies.
Okay.
Because they tended to collapse, and they are getting stronger. I've actually had a lesson and forgot to put them on, and they got strong enough to do it.
That's great. This brings up another thing that I would like to say. I'm sorry, are you finished? I didn't want to step on you. No, you're good? Okay. Realizing that there are no muscles in the fingers. This is one that I didn't believe at first. I went to a doctor's chart in an encyclopedia and looked it up. There are no muscles in the fingers. The very concept of finger strength is somewhat flawed because of that. However, you can develop the back part of the hand to support those fingers a little bit better. And so you can give your kids this little sort of pull and push. It's a little isometric exercise where you feel it push against the thumb a little bit and then let it pop. And you push against the thumb. You can do this with each finger and it helps strengthen in here. Then you can do this opposite, where you use your thumb on the inside of the fingers and have it pop off, which exercises the other side of the hand. Now, I must say, again, I don't feel highly qualified to give a lot of advice like this, and you must be very careful not to overdo these things. You do not want to injure hands by overdoing these kinds of exercises. If you ever have an occasion to discuss these issues with Pam Davenport, who is a very good friend of mine who lives in the Northeast United States, she actually has had personal hand issues. And so she has exercises with rubber bands and things which help to strengthen and do this stuff that I'm talking about right now. And she's much more knowledgeable about it than I am. But so you know, the little motions you do back here, they can strengthen the hand a little, and that helps support the fingers. So it's another thing you can do. All right.
I had one question real quick.
Sure.
I found that a lot of my students struggle with playing the Arkansas Traveler. Just because it's at the beginning and they're kind of still getting used to thumb position, and it has like the double stops in it. How long would you, sometimes we'll work on it for 3 or 4 weeks. How long would you, sometimes then we just kind of move on, but how long would you work on it before you kind of, decide?
I let my students know that on all of these books, these pieces are not really designed to be performance pieces. I don't require them to be memorized. I don't require them to be brought to a level where they present it in public, unless some of the kids, they get captivated by a piece and they want to play I Was a Teenage Monster on a recital, and that's cool, I like that. But no, I agree with you. It would be, you do it until it's not productive any longer and then move on, because you're going to have other opportunities to acquire and deal with the same issue elsewhere in the book with the double stops and whatnot. So I do realize that there are some pieces that once in a while pop out and are pretty hard. And one of them being Busy Bees in Position Pieces Book 1. My students find that pretty hard. But it's so good and it's so helpful that it works. But yeah, you don't have to overdo it, do it until we're all tired of it and move right on.
Thank you.
Okay, and so once again, guys, I'm going to have to go here because I have an appointment. I have to leave. So I'm gonna have to go here, but I want to thank you again for inviting me in. I want to thank you for coming to see me. I look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks. And thanks again to Scarlett for the facilitation of the entire thing.
Okay, see you in 2 weeks, everybody.
Hey.
Thumb Position Book 2. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Scarlett.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you,